Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Have you ever felt like your life just did a total 180 and went straight into thriller territory? Like the person right next to you turned into a complete mystery. And what about when, like, those everyday things you worry about suddenly slam into something totally crazy?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I can see that.
Well, today we are going deep into a thriller that also has some really dark humor and actually some surprisingly tender moments, too. It throws all these questions into a crazy mix. We're talking about Jane and Dan at the End of the World by Colleen Oakley.
Oh, interesting title.
We'll put a link so you can grab a copy on Amazon down in the description. And, it's not just some survival story during a crisis. It's about a marriage that's, well, kind of on the rocks, maybe ending, and the super weird way those two things get tangled up.
Okay, so there's a lot going on.
If you like stories that keep you guessing and make you think, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our future deep dives. All right, let's get into this unique story.
Yeah, okay, so what grabs you right away is how it starts. I mean, it's like it's aware of itself, it's meta. We meet Jane, who writes fiction, and she's getting questioned by the police. And why? Because her book was found at a crime scene. It's like her made-up world is crashing into a real and maybe even dangerous situation.
Oh, wow.
The irony is so obvious.
You could cut it with a knife.
Exactly. Or, as Jane would probably say, it's just a coincidence. Right from the start, you get this back and forth between real and imagined. That goes on through the whole book. And that little correction she makes, the one about coincidence, that tells you so much about her, like, immediately.
Right, right. It's that kind of, I don't know, witty, or maybe a little bit removed observation. Even when she might be in trouble with the law, it makes her really interesting.
Yeah, I see that.
But even before, this first gunshot, we see that Jane is dealing with her own personal anxieties.
Uh-huh.
Her daughter, Sissy, is about to head off to college, and all those complicated feelings come up, like she's going to miss her, but she also remembers wanting that empty nest, too.
Yeah, the mixed emotions of parenting.
And then her writing isn't doing so well. She dreams of being on The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
That's success to her. But in reality, her first book totally flopped.
Oh, no.
It's kind of sad how her outward role as a mom contrasts with, like, her inner desire for, her own creativity. Makes
Uh-huh.
you think about how many of us are dealing with those hidden disappointments while we go through life.
It's something a lot of people can relate to, for sure.
Absolutely.
That inner world of hers, it's important for understanding how she reacts later. It's like she's already at her own end of an era, Sissy leaving and her career not going anywhere. So when we get to that awkward anniversary dinner where she's planning to ask Dan for a divorce, it doesn't feel so random. You can see how things are changing for her.
Mm-hmm.
And that dinner scene, it's just perfect. It shows how they've drifted apart. Dan has no clue what Jane's feeling inside. He's chatting with a food influencer, and he's totally clueless about memes.
I can totally see that happening.
It's like a snapshot of their disconnection. You can almost feel Jane's frustration coming right off the pages.
For sure. And the way that Ayana, the food influencer, is, like, more into getting a good Instagram photo than being a real person. It's so funny, but kind of scary, too, about today's world.
Right, it's a really sharp observation about our times.
And when Jane compares her decision to divorce Dan to a belt too tight, you totally get it. It's like a physical feeling of being trapped.
Mm-hmm.
We also see hints of them trying to fix their marriage, the self-help books, those relationship quizzes. It seems like they're trying superficially to fix something really deep.
Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone, isn't it?
Exactly. And we can't forget the reason Jane decides to end it, those text messages that show Dan's affair. It makes you think about how often we try to fix things on the surface without dealing with the real problems in a relationship.
You're hitting the nail on the head there. It's like those self-help books can only get you so far if there's no trust and communication. Those text messages give Jane a real reason to do what she's been feeling for a while. Then, bam, everything changes when these, like, terrorists show up. Dan's first reaction is so funny. He thinks of Die Hard. It's not heroic at all, but it feels very real to who he is. And their leader, Brick, he doesn't even cover his face. It's creepy. It makes you wonder what he's really up to.
Yeah, why wouldn't he hide? It's so strange.
Exactly. And then it's like Jane's in a dream, this hostage thing. It's exactly like the plot of her own novel.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
It's like you can't make this stuff up.
Except, of course, she did.
Right. And that thought she has, like, I wish I'd written about winning the lottery instead. It's brilliant. It's dark humor mixed with, like, total disbelief at how crazy things are.
I love it. It reminds you how weird and unpredictable life is. Sometimes it's even weirder than the stories we make up.
Exactly. And that's where the author uses dark comedy so well. I mean, you have this life or death situation, but then you see Jane's thoughts, and they're almost calm, like a writer observing things.
Interesting.
It's really effective. And she gets sarcastic to protect herself, especially with Dan. Every sarcastic thing she says has that hurt from his affair with Becca behind it.
Oh, so it's like a way to cope with the pain.
It's like she can't be honest with him anymore. It makes you think, can sarcasm really protect us? Or does it just create bigger walls between people?
Good question. It does seem like a shield, though. But then, in the middle of all this stress, Dan does something totally unexpected. He steps up. The sous chef gets shot, and suddenly Dan remembers all this stuff about anatomy from podiatry school.
Oh, wow.
It's so surprising. It gives you a little hope in a really bad situation.
It does.
This guy who couldn't understand internet stuff moments ago might actually save someone's life.
That's amazing. It shows you how we often don't see the skills people have.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it adds, depth to Dan. He's not some action hero, but he comes through in a different way.
Yeah.
It's like saying that anyone can be heroic in the right situation. But meanwhile, Jane is worried about totally normal things. Like he needs to use the restroom.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
It's just so human, right?
Yeah.
In the middle of this chaos. And remember Javier, the guy who offered to make their dinner better?
Oh, yeah.
The irony isn't lost on Jane, and it gives us a moment to laugh, which is much needed.
Definitely.
Yeah. And even though she's scared, Jane tries to take control. She tries to get to the chef's office to set off the alarm, but it doesn't work. But she notices the security camera. It could be a plan for later.
Right.
Then there's this whole funny thing with the Wi-Fi password. Jane thinks Dan might know it from the chef. They try to talk to each other across this crowded, tense room, and it's just hilarious. Dan keeps saying this thing that makes no sense, and Jane is getting more and more frustrated.
Oh, no, like a bad game of charades.
Exactly. And remember the story about Bob, the train enthusiast? They knew him, and it shows how they've always had trouble communicating.
That's a great detail. That whole scene is funny, but it also says a lot about their relationship. They can't even understand each other about a Wi-Fi password, just like they can't communicate about the bigger problems in their marriage.
Yeah, it's like a little version of their bigger disconnect. And then, boom, the biggest shock of all. Sissy's one of the hostage takers.
What?
Dan can't believe it, and Jane. She's horrified, but also, she realizes it makes sense.
You mean all the weird stuff she did before suddenly makes sense?
Exactly. All the little things click into place. It's the kind of twist that makes you gasp.
I bet. Totally unexpected.
The worst betrayal for a parent. Then the bomb goes off. Thank goodness it was a flashbang, but still totally scary and confusing. You see Brick and Sissy together, and Jane realizes something really hard. Sissy is in love with Brick. It adds this whole other level of teen trauma and messed up loyalty to the situation.
Wow, so it's not just a simple hostage situation anymore.
Not at all. It explains so much of why Sissy acted so strangely. Teenage crushes, especially when they're mixed with rebellion and wanting to make a difference, can lead to bad choices.
Absolutely.
And even with all the stress, Jane's still her observant self. She notices that Sissy's nickname is Goldie, even though her hair isn't even blonde. It's that mix of being a mom, but also being a little, amused that we see in her thoughts.
Yeah, she's a complex character for sure.
Then comes the phone call with Vaughn, and we get the first clue that this is about more than just causing trouble. Otto's a billionaire, and Brick asks Jane why Otto. It's clear they're targeting him for a reason. Jane gets her phone back, and weirdly, Vaughn helps her connect to the restaurant's Wi-Fi. Seems the chef changes it every day, which adds to the, craziness of it all. And guess what? Another person from Jane's past shows up, Lyle, the new publicist from her old publisher.
No way. This is getting more and more complicated. What's Lyle doing there?
Right. This is where the story goes in a direction you won't believe. Lyle, or Kyle, actually tells them the whole hostage thing is a publicity stunt for Jane's book.
A publicity stunt? You're kidding.
He doesn't care about the violence, the shooting, the bomb. It's so crazy it's scary. And he's the one who sent the gift card that got Jane and Dan to the restaurant.
Oh my gosh. That's messed up.
It's insane. All this terror, people getting hurt, just to sell books. And Kyle is just clueless about the human cost. It makes you think about ethics and marketing and what people will do for attention and money.
Yeah, it makes you wonder where the line is.
Then Jane and Dan try to escape from the van. And in all the commotion, Dan confesses his secret hobby. It's this totally random thing, but it makes Jane realize she actually misses her boring, normal life.
That's interesting how sometimes it takes losing something to make you appreciate it.
It's true. And despite the craziness, they have a real connection, even if it's short. Then Sissy shows up, of course.
Of course. Always at the worst possible time.
And her attempts to help them by shooting blanks at the window just show how naive she is and how much Brick controls her.
It's sad that she thinks she's doing good when it's really making things worse.
Yeah, it is. And finally, we find out why Brick's doing all this. He thinks Otto stole his invention, something about nanotechnology and saving the environment. Sissy really believes in Brick's cause, so she's going along with basically an act of terrorism.
It's a lot more complicated than it seemed at first, so it's not just money, it's revenge and a sense of justice driving him. And Sissy, blinded by her feelings for him, is right in the middle of it.
And then the police helicopter finally shows up.
Thank goodness.
Jane and Dan get out of the restaurant, but Sissy runs back inside. She's torn between her family and her loyalty to Brick.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. She's caught between two worlds.
While they're outside, Kip, the negotiator, tries to talk to Brick, who mentions a bomb threat. Dan, trying to help, starts looking for a pressure cooker, but he completely misses the actual C4 explosive. And then Dan does something really brave. He throws a plate to stop Isaac, one of Brick's guys.
Wow, he really stepped up.
It shows how Dan can act quickly when he has to. Right after, Jane panics, then realizes she trusts Dan, and we find out Isaac's still alive. It's a lot to process.
It really is.
And Brick says something creepy about changing the ending of Jane's story by making that line between fiction and reality really blurry.
Chills. So how does it all end?
It's wild. The hostages are freed, and then get this, Jane, Dan, and Brick escape by base jumping.
What?
No way. Totally unexpected. We find out Force of Nature is actually Kyle's unethical marketing team, and Sissy was in on it because she believed in Brick and, well, had a crush on him.
It all makes sense now, but it's still crazy.
And Brick wasn't just after Otto. He won his cryptocurrency like $100 million. It shows that even crazy plots can be about money in the real world.
That's a huge twist, so they got away with it.
Yep. We see a little of what happens after. Jane and Sissy have a tense talk, and at Jane's book signing, she thinks about her family and the whole crazy experience.
That's a good way to wrap it up.
Life goes on, but it's definitely changed.
Yeah, some things you can never go back from.
So that was our deep dive into Jane and Dan at the End of the World. It's a thriller with dark humor and some really touching moments. It definitely keeps you guessing.
Yeah, I can't wait to check it out myself.
Thanks for joining us today. Tell us what you thought. What was your favorite part or the twist that surprised you the most?
Let us know in the comments.
And if you like this, please like and subscribe.
Think about how what we see as real can be mixed up with the stories in our heads. Think about what we might do for the things we believe in. And think about the surprising connections we can make in crazy situations.
What unexpected things could happen in your life? And how would you handle your own end of the world? Or maybe just a really, really bad dinner party?
Until next time.